All right, and we went on to what will the organization need in order to support green initiatives. Well, clear policies and regulations that hit straight to us here. Financial incentives, exposure to market opportunities, capacity building, and surprisingly, financial support is right down there. Real. Okay.
We don't need money.
So this is
very rich believers.
right. But this is a very important narrative, and I think it resonates well because I think we have been getting this question: what is the government's pathway on our climate resilient development? And this is very important, and I think we had the climate policy in 2009. And in 2009, the climate policy outlined that we need to have a clear institutional framework. We need to mainstream climate. It took 9 years before 2018, we had to change government to get a ministry on climate change. So that's fantastic to have a ministry on climate change. So now we at least have an institutional framework, but that's just the shell. You need the army and all that. So tomorrow, we think some important announcements will be made on the institutional framework, if Tun is going to make those announcements, which will be great. And I think from then on, we need to chart our path very clearly on a climate resilient pathway. I think the policies are there. It's just not the climate policy. We have to also look at the biodiversity policy because they are all in synergistic effort.
Yeah, it needs to be seen in a wholesome way.
We've got the policy pathway is very clear, but I think we need to really work on the implementation of it, where it really matters.
Nago, maybe I can elaborate
Please
a bit.
Elaborate, yeah.
When we first started to try to tackle green buildings, in 2009, we always believed that we must start with incentives. We must start to put the carrot in front, let it run for a few years. And I think there are some people from Ministry of Finance here, ex-Ministry of Finance staff, and they work with me on the incentives.
True.
So initially it was to put the carrot, then later on you take out the rod to make it regulations. Right. Because if you start imposing change from policy straight to regulations, you will get a sort of resistance, and people will always find a way around it. Right. The standards are important. So a vision, a good minister, vision, clear policies, put some incentives out for 5 to 10 years, then after that, impose the regulations. That's what we found worked very well for Green Building Index. And I mean, in 10 years, we've certified 240 million square feet, one of the fastest growing tools in the world. And it's done it along that line.
Congrats. Yeah. Dr. Cho, you want to read?
Yeah, I could just respond to this question. I think green cities as a term is extremely important because when we look at the future, we recognize, one, I talked about energy efficiency and how we need to increase energy efficiency as one of the levers of getting to sky. But urban areas is where the bulk of energy is consumed. Yep. And what we're seeing around the world is urbanization. People are moving into cities. We're having these huge mega cities with all the problems that Dr. Tan described for us. Cities are therefore, they will be the critical battleground. They are crucial in achieving our energy efficiency objectives. They've got to be energy efficient. At the same time, as you pointed out, Dr. Tan, they've got to be livable. We've got to be able to enjoy living within this urban landscape. So when we talk about energy efficiency, when we talk about energy consumption, the cities, what we do within cities is crucial.
You want to react to it?
Well, I just want to add another dimension into this green city notion. When we say green cities, often people think about low carbon, low emission, right? How to adopt the technology, reduce the emission, which is great, which is fine. But I think the dimension we often neglect is the climate resilience. Because when you look at now the city spectrum, a lot of the cities are in the coastal lines. And these are the areas that most prone to climate disaster risks. Right. So how we build the green cities, while in the meantime, we should think about the next decades, how these infrastructure really can adapt to the changing climate.
Right. I see Dr. Cho wants the floor again. I just would like to check with the Secretary. How are we doing for time? We are good to go on? All right. Okay. Dr.
Just
Cho,
very
yes.
quickly,
Right.
thank you, Dr. Nagu. I just would like to make a point. It's just an observation.
Okay.
I think that certainly with some of the remarks that we've been making in this hall, we are rather modest about Malaysia. It's a small country, and so on. Let's not be too modest. I think it's nice to be modest, but let's not be too modest. If we think about energy demand and energy growth, if you think about population increase, the bulk of the world's population is in Asia.
Right.
That is, of course, China, India coming up very quickly, and Southeast Asia, ASEAN. And Malaysia is a key member of ASEAN. So from that context, what you do could be very important in signaling to others around the world what is possible.
Dr. Cho, we have always liked to look very small, but we are the Davids that slays the Goliaths.
I hope so.
Right.
Because we have shown in Malaysia that volunteers can make a huge difference. Governments can come and go. Sometimes they are good, sometimes they are not so good, but people make a difference.
I tell you, that's the constant, right? That's the remaining constant, and that's important. And I liked your point about regulation versus incentives. When we were flagged with this statistic about mismanaged plastics, I think somebody showed the slide. We are number 8 in the world. If you do per capita, probably we are number 1. I do not know. But, so we had few options. We wanted to follow the Kenyan pathway, come out with regulations, slap everybody with a jail term and disebat rotan sekali. Sorry, they means whipped if you are carrying a plastic bag. We didn't want to go that pathway. So we took a phased approach until 2030, where we're using market-based instruments, polluter pay principle. In fact, in the last budget, we even gave incentives if industry is going to move towards bioresins. And so we are giving all this holistic ecosystem to allow people to move, and maybe later down the line, if we need to introduce a regulation. Because I think Gurmeet is here. Gurmeet will know we have a lot of laws in Malaysia. We have enough laws. Is the enforcement not implemented? Yes, that's the question. I was waiting to hear that voice, and that is the issue, right? You can have laws. It's as good as implementation.